Story 1. A bed bug infestation. I had one in my first apartment that I got from neighboring units, and it took about a year and one move to get rid of them completely. Knowing that the one place in your home where you are supposed to relax and rest is infested, and that you will wake up covered in new bites every day contributed to a significant decline in my mental health. They make you feel like you are going crazy. Story 2. You endured several years of abuse in the troubled teen industry, were kidnapped in the middle of the night twice and forced onto a plane to hell, and knew your parents happily funded the whole thing. Story 3. Having parents who struggle with their mental health and either deny it or refuse treatment. Story 4. I posted this on another thread last night, but it rings just as true here. I married a small-town country boy, the career military kind. He stood 6'1" and weighed 250 pounds with storm gray eyes. I absolutely handed him the pen I was chewing on in line at the bank when he said, "Ma'am, might I borrow that?" Not even my equal, truthfully the better half. He was my peace, and together we were plenty. It was true love, the kind that transcends time and space. He gave me 2 beautiful girls and became such a good dad. A girl dad. Healed old, knotted wounds in my chest. We had a charmed life. My best friend in every way. His laugh added years to my life. He was everything I was not and more than I deserved. I had a lot of trauma before him, and I always felt like he was my reward for making it. He served 2 decades in uniform, 9 combat tours. We waited for him proudly and loudly. He was not home for years if you combine his time, but he was always deeply devoted and we always flourished. This beautiful man occupied the space between my heartbeats and breath. He retired last year and started acting off horror film level off. We thought his adjustment to civilian life was harder than anticipated. I will spare you the excruciating and sad avalanche of things we endured for over a year. Therapy turned into other doctors and eventually neurologists, and we found out that he had dementia. Took him faster than we could figure it out. He was 41. It has been 5 months. My oldest is 16, and she is worried that I will grow older in sorrow, hand in hand with my grief because I lost her father. She said in therapy that she knew what real love was from seeing us and was afraid for me having to live without him. She cannot imagine it. She watched me send him to war and him return to me enough times that she thought him invincible. I told her what I have told you. I had my forever person, my great soul-rendering love, and even though it did not last, all my wildest dreams came true. I hope it never finds me again. A love that rivals the heavens. So I hope it finds you. I hope destiny weaves a fairy tale around you and that you get a happily ever after. I hope with all the love I once held that yours rattles the stars and lasts forever. That is what I hope for my daughters, what I had. I hope it finds you too if it has not, and I hope it stays. For the man who was the sun that rose and set in my world, who said my name like a prayer, you gave me enough to last a lifetime. I miss you every second between this one and the next. Thank you for the award, kind Redditor. I am overwhelmed by the kindness in the comments, the genuine, beautiful, poetic commentary. Thank you. I was asked many times for another piece. I wrote him a lot of love letters over the years because he was often far from home. For those who asked, here is a piece of one of my favorites. Every breath within the notes of all the love songs ever written is how I get to the place where I try to fill the space between heartbeats. For that is where I find you, in the days before you belonged to me. The saddest days of my life are the long years that stretched between us when I did not know your name. You need not call me back in time to you. Simply look at me should you wish to see a soul transcended. If you yearn to hear the angels sing. When God Almighty roared life into the universe and set galaxies on axis to rival the heavens, undoubtedly our stars were born together. It is so easy to love you. I cannot fathom another reason. Surely our romance has echoed through 1,000 lifetimes, and without fail it will ring through eternity. In this I will believe for all of my days, and when time stops I will find you and love you again. It is said that when God calls us at the end, we leave everything behind but our love. My prayers have never changed. I ask for nothing more than to keep yours and take the long way home. Anything less would break my heart. For the man for whom the sun rises and sets, for all the magic between us, I will always be a fool for you. We did not get to take that long road, and I think I will be homesick for him all of my life. Thank you for the awards and brilliant, beautiful comments. My heart has been full all day. What a lovely feeling. Story 5. Having an emotionally cold mother can deeply harm your mental health. Story 6. Being raped is absolutely horrifying, and it taints every aspect of your life until you die. Story 7. Psychosis occurring after meditating and educating yourself, in which you are fully aware that you are experiencing psychosis and are not acting rationally, but you cannot stop it. Story 8. Being cheated on by your spouse breaks every part of you. Story 9. Kidney stones are terrible. Anyone who has experienced them knows what I am talking about. If you have not, it feels like razor blades spinning in your abdomen. I had 4 last year. The pain was so bad that my mind wished for death. Drink water, kids. Story 10. I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder from being raped as a child, and I would not wish it on my worst enemy. I feel like a powerless 5-year-old again when someone walks past me in public and I catch the smell of the same washing powder my abuser used. It has been 20 years, and not a day goes by when I do not think about what happened. Trauma is horrible. Story 11. Losing a loved one to terminal cancer. Seeing someone in immense pain as they wither away into a hollow version of their vibrant self will always be seared into my mind. The feeling of being powerless is a constant source of stress. Story 12. Eating the world's hottest peppers. I ate 2 ghost peppers several years ago, and to this day no pain has come close to what I felt that day. I vomited half an hour later, and 20 minutes after that I had severe diarrhea. The pain worsened and lasted about 6 days. That night I had the worst stomach pain of my life. I thought it would be gone the next morning, but it intensified. It felt as if a volcano had erupted in my stomach. The pain became so unbearable I cried. I considered going to the hospital, but thankfully I did not. For the next 5 days I vomited every other hour while my stomach felt like it was on fire. By the end of the 6th day the pain began to subside, and it was gone by the 7th day. That was the worst pain of my life, which I would not wish on my worst enemy. Be careful with extremely spicy foods and learn from my mistake. Story 13. I lost my soul dog on April 30th, 2023. I adopted another on April 29th, 2024, but I had him for less than a month before I had to say goodbye to him as well. I miss them both and cry about them regularly. Story 14. I had a stillborn at 23, became a widow at 34, and lost my mother at 44. I have had enough loss to last me a lifetime, but I am sure there will be more one day. Story 15. I would be more than happy if my enemies experienced all the misery and pain they inflicted on me, my family, and my friends. Story 16. I am still recovering from extreme heavy metal and petrochemical poisoning that was nearly fatal. I experienced severe migraines and headaches, daily nausea, dizziness, and no energy. I had stabbing pains in my organs, brain zaps from the chemicals, and constant shaking due to metal deposits in my nervous system. I could not listen to music, gained weight, lost a quarter of my hair, and could not interact with anyone. I would never wish this torture on anyone. Story 17. I work in a call center. People are difficult and I have lost my empathy. Story 18. I was homeless, and I never want to be there again. I do not wish it on anyone. Story 19. I am struggling with a mental illness. People do not realize how terrible it really is. Story 20. I watched coworkers jump from the windows of the 105th floor on September 11th, 2001. Story 21. A herniated disc crushed some nerves in my spine, but my brain perceived the sensation as if my entire right leg were being crushed. They gave me so much morphine that I had to be on a heart monitor because there was a risk I could stop breathing. The pain was so excruciating that I screamed almost constantly for 48 hours. I cannot describe it. After 5 years, I still look back on it in complete disbelief. Story 22. Being diagnosed with terminal cancer robs you of everything. Physically, mentally, your sense of self, your dreams, your future. It has been 2.5 years of constant pain and struggle, and I do not know how much longer I can keep this up. I went from being a healthy 30-year-old with a master's degree, working a job I loved, and married to my soulmate in college. Sweetheart, to a 100% disabled wreck with a colostomy bag and nephrostomy tubes and 2-foot-long scars up and down my abdomen from failed surgeries. To be clear, my husband is still here, and I cannot describe just how wonderful and supportive he has been. My treatment plan is palliative. They cannot cure my cancer. They can only treat some symptoms and try to prolong life. Have gone through more than 20 rounds of chemotherapy with no end in sight. I cannot stop. The tumors are not shrinking, but the treatment is keeping them from growing, so that is the best I can hope for. It feels like being poisoned every 3 weeks, and I spend all day in bed because of the nausea and joint and bone pain. I have lost half my body weight because I cannot keep food down, and I do not recognize the bald, emaciated skeleton in the mirror. I must make hard choices with bad outcomes and keep going because the alternative is worse. I also wonder if I should just give up because I can see the toll it is taking on my husband, who is now my full-time caregiver, and the medical bills keep rolling in. Anyway, cancer is awful, 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Story 23. I had to leave my parents behind very abruptly because I was forced to choose between them and myself. I hate it. I am surrounded by people who can turn to their mothers and fathers, and I cannot. Story 24. Watching my parents die is something we all have to face, but I still would not wish it on anyone. The pain is beyond words. I am going to be 60 in 3 weeks. They died 10 and 11 years ago, and it still hurts. Story 25. I had a massive hemorrhagic stroke at age 23. I am 30 now. After being in a coma for 9 days, I had to relearn how to walk and talk and recover from aphasia and ataxia. I still experience some residual effects, but I am glad to be alive. I would not want anyone, even my worst enemy, to have to go through it. It was absolutely dreadful. Story 26. False allegations haunted me. I woke up every day for a year with the worst imaginable dread. I could not stand my reality. I took far more sleeping pills than necessary just to escape. I barely ate or took care of myself. The torment of knowing you are innocent but cannot prove it is something I would not wish on anyone. Story 27. Going through the justice system in the United States of America as an ordinary person. Story 28. My father abandoned my mother, my sister, and me. I had to take my father's place as the man of the house at 15. I even thought about dropping out of school to work, but my mother would not let me. She told me to finish school. My sister went to live with my father, which left my mother having to pay child support for her, even though he did not need it. That was just one of the things he did to spite my mother. Now we are better off. I have a job to help support my mother. We have our own home and a new car. I got my mother's old car, and we enjoy going out every once in a while. My mother has always told our friends, who, by the way, helped us through it all, that I was always her loyal one. I might have gone through a lot and did not have a traditional last few years of childhood, but I can only thank God and my mom for making me the man I had to be. Story 29. Grief. I lost my nephew to suicide last year. Grief has changed almost every aspect of my life. I do not see things as bright anymore. I have a new level of irritation that I hate. My health declined. My weight increased dramatically. My face aged 10 years. I know everyone will suffer loss, but I wish we could just be sad instead of overwhelmed by grief. Story 30. The death of a child. I experienced this twice. Once with my very premature newborn son who lived for only a day, and then when my 17-year-old son, who had severe mental health problems that were not treated properly, committed suicide. At the time, I said I would not wish it on my worst enemy, and I meant it. I cannot imagine any circumstances in which a parent deserves that. As a consequence, I now know I have already been through my worst day. No matter what else happens in my life, it cannot be worse. I had a heart attack a few years ago, and I did not much care. It felt like, oh well, maybe this is the end. A few weeks ago, I was disciplined and demoted at work. My boss wondered how I was taking it so well. I was not upset or angry. I just acted like, okay, what's next? He does not know about my son. Everything else pales in comparison. It has been 6 years, and the pain is not as raw now, but I still dream about him vividly. I can still hear his voice in my mind, and I would do anything for another minute with him. Story 31. Losing my dad at 10 was devastating. Seeing my mother break over and over as she tried to tell me he was gone was a torture I wish no one experiences. My mother loved my father deeply. His death shattered her. Story 32. My wife took her own life. I came home from work and found her. She was the favorite person I had ever met, and I loved her with every fiber of my being. She was 37. Her 39th birthday would have been this month. Story 33. Shingles was extremely painful. Painkillers did not touch it. 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, gabapentin, and oxycodone. It lasted nearly 2 weeks. I lost 15 pounds because I could not keep food down. The rash was on my back and any pressure on it was excruciating. I curled up on my knees moaning for days. My wife thought I had suddenly taken up religion when she walked in and found me in a prayer position, speaking in tongues. Multiple trips to urgent care and the hospital resulted in being told there was nothing they could do. Finally went away, but it was awful. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Story 34. I came home from school and found my mother's body after she had taken her own life. Story 35. Fertility treatments and pregnancy losses definitely affect your mind and the rest of your body too. Story 36. Aortic dissection after giving birth is serious and potentially life-threatening. Story 37. Watching my father die. He had at least 2 heart attacks by the time I arrived at the hospital. He was connected to half a dozen machines and had a tube in his throat. He was unconscious. A nurse came to me and my brothers, who were waiting in a family room, and told us he had regained consciousness and that if we wanted to see him we should go with her. As we walked down the hall she said, "If you have anything to say to him, now may be the time," and ushered us into the room. He was wide-eyed, confused, tears in his eyes, fighting against the restraints, choking on the tube. He looked like he was in horrible pain and most of all terrified. He looked like a child and a mortally wounded animal. Everything else of him was gone in that moment. He knew he was dying and was unable to stop it. It was the most frightening thing I have ever seen, and the soul-crushing helplessness of that moment has stayed with me ever since. When they increased his morphine to try to let him sleep, it felt like all the wind was knocked out of me, and he never regained consciousness. His organs basically shut down after that, and less than an hour later we were told that life support was the only thing keeping his body alive. I will never be able to unsee that, ever. Story 38. A violent home invasion and robbery left 5 victims. Not one of us escaped significant, lifelong psychological damage. Story 39. Inheritance. I got one. Fuck my enemy. I hope they never get it. Story 40. Losing a loved one is something most of us will experience at some point in our lives. Story 41. My pet dog died. It has been nearly 20 years, and I still dream about her sometimes. Love you, Kana. Story 42. Losing my dad to cancer when I was 15. Nothing I have been through in the 30 years since comes even close. Story 43. Nothing. The people I hate deserve the worst I have been through multiplied by 40 squared. Fuck those people. How might one let go? Story 44. I had shoulder replacement surgery. I planned to end my life twice because of the pain. I am so sorry you are in such severe pain and felt so desperate. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, call your local emergency number now. If you are in the United States or Canada, call or text 988. In the United Kingdom, call Samaritans at 116 123. In Australia, call Lifeline at 13 11 14. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local emergency services or a local crisis hotline. If you want, tell me your country and I can help find local support. You do not have to go through this alone. Story 45. I was caring for my mother in hospice while my marriage was falling apart, ultimately leading to a divorce. 6 months and 4 days later, my father died. Story 46. Severe sciatica. I understand why euthanasia is considered after experiencing that kind of pain. Story 47. I spent a year repeatedly reopening anal fissures almost every time I used the bathroom. It felt like a jagged fingernail on a dry hand slowly tearing the rectal lining every few days. Story 48. When I was still in agony from it, I realized I would not wish my dead wisdom tooth on my worst enemy. Now that it's over, I realize I should. The oafs who raped my friend deserve worse. Story 49. A horse kicked me square in the genitals. Both testicles ruptured, and I required surgery. I immediately vomited and passed out. When I came to, it happened again. Paramedics woke me and gave me morphine, but it still was not enough to prevent me from passing out from the pain. It felt like my brain would simply shut off whenever I had a surge of pain. I would not wish that on anyone. Even the nurses felt bad. Most were aware of how much pain it takes to make someone pass out multiple times. Story 50. My partner was diagnosed with epilepsy, and a sibling entered psychiatric care within the same month. Story 51. I walked in on my then love interest sleeping with my best friend on the eve of another best friend's wedding. I was supposed to smile and keep myself together because I was the maid of honor. She knew I liked him, he knew I liked him, and he had told me the feeling was mutual. So say la vie. Story 52. Cohabiting with an ex while they figure things out. Story 53. I used to have a good answer for this, but then I got better enemies. So they can have debilitating muscle spasms in their shoulder. Fuck them. Story 54. I had a miscarriage in 2023 and was in pain for an entire month. No doctor even took me seriously. I was just told to take Tylenol. I could not pass gas or have a bowel movement without intense pain and cramping. It was the worst pain I have ever felt. Story 55. I would not wish anything on my worst enemy. I do not have one unless you count Joe and Kathleen Rowling, but since she does not know I exist, that is probably pushing it. If I did, I would want access to all the worst things to wish on them and would deploy them as appropriate. Story 56. My father had a bone marrow transplant, but his body rejected it after 3 months. What he went through made the cancer seem easy by comparison. He suffered more than I can explain, and I still have post-traumatic stress disorder. When he passed, it was a blessing to see him out of pain. I would not wish this on anyone. Story 57. I am depressed and suicidal, just lying in bed and not feeling anything. I am really sorry you are feeling this way. If you are in immediate danger, call your local emergency number or go to the nearest emergency department now. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are in the United Kingdom, you can call Samaritans at 116 123. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local emergency services or look up a local crisis line. Are you safe right now? Do you have a plan to harm yourself? I can help you find resources or contact someone if you want. Story 58. Non-stop debilitating vertigo for 3 days. My left vestibular nerve suddenly stopped functioning. It has been 6 months, and I still experience constant dizziness and short bouts of vertigo several times per day. However, those first 3 days were absolute hell. Story 59. I endured 15 years of mental and physical abuse from my now ex-wife. I had no idea until I finally realized it. Story 60. I was involved with a person with borderline personality disorder. It has been over 6 years, and I am still dealing with severe damage, including post-traumatic stress disorder related to the relationship. Unless you have experienced it firsthand, you cannot understand what life is like after a person with borderline personality disorder has discarded you. Story 61. I had a really great day yesterday. I wouldn't wish it on them. Story 62. Witnessing a loved one attempt suicide. Story 63. It is the worst kind of sore throat, where nothing helps except lying in bed and hoping it goes away quickly. Story 64. As a teenager, I was heavily into drugs and would do anything to get high. I heard that you could get high if you stole some Benadryl from the medicine drawer in the bathroom. It was not a good experience. I thought I was going to die. I had dark, unnerving hallucinations, heard voices, and became paranoid. It lasted for hours. I ended up falling asleep in a bush for miles from my home. Story 65. Losing my mom and sister unexpectedly 7 months apart was the hardest thing I have lived through, but unfortunately watching my last living sister die of motor neuron disease, also known as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, was worse. I would not wish that on anyone. Story 66. Am I evil for wishing the bad things I went through on my worst enemy? I do not care about their feelings. Story 67. I have been through some horrific experiences, but I am incredibly vengeful, so I am happy for them to suffer as much as I have. Story 68. I had a miscarriage and was unable to become pregnant for years. To this day, I will never know whether I will become a mother. That kind of wondering and waiting shreds the soul and breaks the heart in two. Story 69. A hypertonic pelvic floor with an almost complete loss of genital sensation. Story 70. My child had colic for the first 3 months of her life. Story 71. Withdrawal from benzodiazepines is an absolute horror that can last for months. Story 72. My personal battle with plasma cell leukemia. As of November 2024, it has been 78 months. I would not wish any of what I have been through on anyone. Story 73. I had throat cancer and received chemotherapy and radiation therapy. The first 15 radiation treatments were okay, but the next 22 were terrible. Story 74. I suffered a corneal abrasion after my eyes were taped shut during a cardiac catheterization. The pain was extreme. Story 75. I cared for my wife of 32 years as she slowly wasted away over a month from brain cancer. Her body was deteriorating. Thankfully, she was unaware. I gave her morphine every 2 hours. Story 76. A couple of issues involving physical pain, testicular torsion and pilonidal cyst. Story 77. Hunger. I grew up in a poor family with a father who had a good pension but spent his money only on beer and cigarettes. We did not always have food in the house and often went hungry. The only food I got was at school, digging uneaten food out of trash cans after lunch. Story 78. I deteriorated slowly over the course of a year. I recovered with about a week to spare. It was traumatic. Story 79. Last year in February, my mother died. This January, my best friend died. In July, I had to put down my dog of 14 years. Last week, I learned my 7-year-old cat has cancer. Story 80. I helped care for my grandparents with dementia. Before they became ill, I was very close to them. After the diagnosis, they became verbally abusive. Once, while I was helping my grandmother put on her shoes for a doctor's appointment, she almost broke my ribs. Story 81. Derealization episodes with accompanying panic attacks that last 8 to 10 days at a time. Story 82. Losing a sibling, a single trigger pull from being gone. I could write a list. Story 83. I live in constant pain and have not yet found a doctor who can diagnose the cause. Some days are manageable, but others are absolute hell. Sometimes tears simply flow because I cannot hold them back. Story 84. Esophageal cancer was hell. Against the odds, I am doing okay. Story 85. Losing my son. No parent ever thinks they will have to bury their child. It has been almost 10 years, and the pain never goes away. Story 86. Watching your big, strong, healthy father wither away painfully from metastatic cancer. Story 87. At my worst with alcoholism, I was in a constant state of severe anxiety, hoping my next drink would be the one to end it all. Story 88. Cancer. When I went through treatment, even people who didn't like me sent me a card. No one should have to go through it. If you are, my heart goes out to you. Story 89. Losing the one parent who raised you on their own and knowing you will never see or speak with them about the things you used to share is devastating. I lost my dad in 2022 to pneumonia. I was his only child, so I handled his cremation and everything that came with it. The strangest part was trying to find an urn. I wanted to ask him which one he would have. Wanted and then realized I never could. He was older, 51 when I was born, and he raised me alone because my mother was not interested in being a parent. I went to my dad for everything, and the nagging feeling that I can no longer turn to him has not left me. He was an amazing man, and I still hear his voice in my head. I would not wish that feeling on anyone. Story 90. My best friend committed suicide, and there was never a funeral. Story 91. I was burned on 5% of my body by molten salt at 450 degrees Celsius. The worst part was cleaning the burns twice a day. The pain when water hit them was unbearable. Story 92. A toothache is no laughing matter. My face became swollen, and the pain was unreal. I would not wish it on anyone. Story 93. I do not care what happens to my enemy. That is not my problem. Story 94. I had stage 4 diffuse large B-cell lymphoma with a tumor the size of an orange and was so weak I could barely wash my hair. Story 95. Heartbreak over a girl. It sucks the life out of you. Story 96. I would wish it on my worst enemy. Story 97. I would not wish it as an event, but there are some of those moments I would not mind sharing. Story 98. Psychiatric misdiagnosis and inappropriate medication nearly cost me my life. Story 99. I have come to value physical and mental discomfort as providing self-knowledge and opportunities to grow. As a result, I do not feel that I have enemies, only experiences to learn from. I hope the cruel people in my life find the same path. Story 100. Preeclampsia occurred during pregnancy. The delivery was difficult. Story 101. I experienced mental, emotional, and physical abuse from my parents and later in relationships. That was painful. Story 102. Trauma of any kind is unnecessary. No one should have to endure it, especially when it is family-related. I would not wish it on anyone, not even my worst enemy, because it ruins you for life in different ways. There is no simple way to heal. Even if you are healed, it can still affect you. Story 103. Gender dysphoria. Being born with the wrong chromosomes and body. Story 104. I went in on a Thursday and was hospitalized for internal bleeding over Super Bowl weekend. I had to stay for 4 days because blood kept coming out in a way that worried every doctor I saw. Because of the Super Bowl, none of the departments would run the tests I needed or had staff available, so I just sat there with what felt like barbed wire being pulled through me constantly. The Monday after the weekend, they finally began running tests but could not find anything wrong. I started feeling better on Sunday and by Monday felt pretty normal. To this day, I do not have a direct answer for what happened. Story 105. I do not think there is anything I would not wish on my worst enemy. The worst thing I ever went through was being cheated on. Story 106. A year and a half of depression. My parents did not believe me. I was so close to taking my own life for at least 5 months. I am lucky to be alive. I'm sorry you went through that. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, please call emergency services or go to the nearest emergency room. In the United States, you can call or text 988 for immediate support. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local emergency number or a local crisis line. If you would like, I can help find resources or someone to talk to. Story 107. I had retinal surgery. My eye became infected after the surgery. I went from being able to see to being blind within a few hours. I had to drive to the doctor with my one good eye and receive an antibiotic injection into my eye. I could see the antibiotic being injected. Fortunately, it worked, but I had to have the surgery repeated. Story 108. Losing a father to the most rapid and devastating form of cancer. Story 109. I had cancer 3 times in 5 years and was told my son would die on 3 separate occasions over a 2-year period. He and I are still here, so we are winning. Story 110. A terminal cancer diagnosis. Mine, but I cannot imagine it being much better from the outside either. Story 111. I had postpartum depression. It has been 9 years and I am doing well now, but my brain has been permanently altered. Story 112. Taking care of your grandmother with stage 4 breast cancer. Seeing her go through that is a nightmare. Story 113. Hard to choose. Hyperemesis gravidarum. A kidney spasm after a kidney stent caused by a stone. Of those 3, all were more painful than the 40-hour labor that almost killed me and my son. Losing people I love more frequently than most. Story 114. I had my tonsils removed and surgery to correct a deviated septum at the same time. During recovery, I wished for death. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, call emergency services. If you are in the United States, call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are outside the United States, contact your local emergency number or a local crisis hotline. Story 115. Salmonella. If I got it again, I would take the easy way out. I am sorry you are feeling this way. Are you in immediate danger or do you have a plan to harm yourself? If you are, please call your local emergency services right now or go to the nearest emergency room. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 for immediate support. If you are outside the United States, tell me your country and I will find a crisis number for you. Would you like to talk about what happened? I can stay with you and help find support. Story 116. Watching a loved one die of cancer is brutal, especially at the end when their organs begin to fail. Story 117. We know we love happiness, but life often brings unhappiness. This life can be crazy. We Americans seem spoiled to others, and it seems to be much worse. Story 118. My wife passed away. My son was in a coma after open-heart surgery at 7 months old. Story 119. Being a caregiver is difficult. My advice is to get help. Do not do it alone. It is mentally draining. I have been through it and will not do it again. I also had a miscarriage after finally becoming pregnant, following almost a decade of trying. Story 120. He went from being an outgoing, social, and active guy to a depressed, anxious loner. Story 121. Burying your child. The smallest coffins are the heaviest. I still carry the weight. Story 122. I lost 4 fingers in a factory accident when I was 19. I had just finished my second year of a pre-dental undergraduate program, so I had to choose a different career path. Story 123. I underwent triple coronary artery bypass graft surgery. The worst part by far was the removal of the chest tube. It felt like I was being pulled inside out. Story 124. I dealt personally with the deaths of both parents, caring for them as they slipped away. I was in the hospital for over a month for a condition that should have killed me and probably will one day. I have seen pain, suffering, and agony that keeps me up at night. But if we are talking about my worst enemy, the person whom I despise more than anything, it is all fair game, and I hope that the worst I have suffered is only the start for them. Story 125. Depends on who the worst enemy is, but getting stabbed really hurts. Seriously, knives are dangerous. I feel bad for all British people. Story 126. I do not think the suffering I have experienced would improve the demeanor, stability, or decency of my worst enemy, so wishing that suffering on them would be counterproductive to my own happiness. If we are just answering what the worst thing I have experienced is, it was the treatment I received at one of those schools now the subject of documentaries and lawsuits. I could tell many stories, but suffice to say it was all terrible. Story 127. Schizoaffective disorder. You really start to lose a significant portion of your humanity. Your emotional and logical understanding of everyone around you becomes warped into a reality that is nearly inescapable and shared by no one. Story 128. The enemies that cause mental anguish are truly demonic. I have dealt with them, and it took me to a dark place in my mind. I lost my freedom while trying to make them go away. In my mind, the idea of doing something to them if they kept it up felt like a way of coping, but it is still painful that people provoke you even when you mind your own business. Coworkers do it, perhaps because I avoid people. Even strangers will test you. Some people are naturally malicious and may believe they are doing nothing wrong. Story 129. My dad had a meth-fueled psychotic break, pointed a gun at me, tore apart a fan while pointing at the wires and calling them cameras, set off fireworks in our crawl space, and ranted about a group of people he chased off our A-frame roof in the middle of the night and the drone he claimed they flew around our house for the next 2 days. My mom claimed that everywhere she lived, gangs were organized to drive her insane, showing up at particular times to do specific things, gangs talking, or breaking into her home and poisoning her. She constantly claimed to be hacked, embraced theories about weather control, the high-frequency active auroral research program, and chemtrails, and slid further into housing insecurity as she became more of a target to be taken advantage of and squandered the assistance and resources offered. Both situations had no access to mental health facilities, assistance, or support, because technically they weren't considered a danger, did not want help, or were unhoused. Hospitals and social programs were unhelpful or non-existent, and the police were uninterested in helping. Fuck a motherfucking conspiracy theory. Story 130. Rape, waiting 3 years for a trial and then receiving a not proven verdict. Story 131. I contracted mononucleosis 3 weeks ago, and I am still not fully recovered. It is debilitating in many ways and interferes with work and social life. I am fortunate that my employer is allowing me a lot of time off, but many people are not as fortunate. Story 132. I was the caretaker for the woman who raised me. Watching cancer wither her away, despite my best efforts to keep her healthy over the years, was something I would never wish on anyone. Story 133. Listening to your husband overdose on the phone is the most helpless and heartbreaking feeling on the planet. Story 134. Not nearly as bad as some other things people have said, but appendicitis can be very painful. A ruptured appendix is, in my opinion, one of the most physically painful things a person can experience, and it is the most painful thing I have ever felt. Story 135. Losing a loved one, especially when you were very close to them. Story 136. I had 10 years of hemorrhoids. I recommend the surgery. It was such a relief after about a month of healing. Story 137. My brother has paranoid schizophrenia. It is the worst to grieve every day for someone who is still alive. He had cancer, and watching him change and be lost to an illness this severe is devastating. Story 138. 1. Caregiver to an abusive father. 2. Almost losing my husband to a freak accident. 3. Caregiver to a terminally ill child. If anyone comments, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, we may have words. Story 139. I lost twin boys to prematurity. They lived for one day. Story 140. Literally my life. I wish I were spared from all of this. Story 141. Stevens-Johnson syndrome. I would not wish it on anyone. Story 142. I suppose gout. As for my worst enemy, I would definitely want them to go through that shit. Fuck them. Story 143. 10 years of opiate addiction. Even at the height of my addiction, whenever I was using and someone asked to try opiates for the first time, I would loudly and firmly say, hell no. I was not responsible for putting that into someone else's veins. Story 144. Panic attacks are the worst experience I have had. They make me feel out of control, as if I am dying and cannot stop it. Altitude sickness was the worst I have felt physically. Story 145. I am losing my father. I genuinely hate some of my former boyfriends, but I would never wish such a loss on them. Story 146. I was born into a severely broken family. We did not even have a house at the time. Story 147. I had a severe bout of pneumonia and was laid out for 3 weeks. I often wonder just how close I was to dying. Story 148. Having your significant other forcibly kept from you for months with no way to contact them. Story 149. I had a broken clavicle repaired surgically. A secondary break at the edge of the titanium plate went undiagnosed, and I was told to continue physical therapy, which led to frozen shoulder. It was the worst pain I have ever experienced. Story 150. I have been lonely my whole life. It is the worst feeling. It cannot get any worse. Story 151. I watched my mother suffer from cancer, not knowing I could have saved her if I had had more faith. Story 152. Withdrawal symptoms, dextromethorphan overdose, Portuguese man-of-war stings, and being dropped into a bonfire. I can keep going. Story 153. I went through a cesarean section when I was not fully numb and the epidural was faulty. Story 154. I had a stroke and lost use of the dominant side of my body. I am still paying the price. Who would ask this question to hear all these sad stories? Story 155. My father had dementia. He has died, but his body does not know it. Story 156. Clostridioides difficile infection followed by a flare of colitis. I had continuous rectal bleeding for several months and lost 50 pounds during that time. My diet was good, though. Story 157. Falling so hard for someone and being led on for years, only to be told by mutual friends that they think you're an ugly-ass freak who looks like they have monkeypox. I know it's not as bad as someone dying, but goddammit it hurts more than people think. Story 158. Being hospitalized with coronavirus disease 2019 at the start of the pandemic. Story 159. Watching a sibling slowly die of addiction and eventually overdose. Then watching your parents pick up the pieces and move forward after fighting to save their life for 2 decades. Story 160. I woke up the morning my daughter did not, 7 months ago tomorrow. Story 161. Nothing. If they're my worst enemy, I won't hold back. They will suffer, motherfucker. Story 162. Vietnam. Even now, after more than 50 years, I can close my eyes and be instantly transported back to that hell on earth. It has been said that the war is never over until you do not have to live with it anymore. It is true. Story 163. In my mid-20s, I had a girlfriend named Maggie. We had been friends since high school. I knew it was a bad idea for us to be together. She had struggled with substance abuse issues the whole time we knew each other. But I loved her. She had a beautiful soul. But there was a hole in it she filled with anything that could make her feel good for a couple of hours. She ended up cheating on me. I should have seen it coming. I think I did, somewhere in the back of my mind. I dumped her. Then we got back together. This cycle repeated a few times until I cut off communication completely. I did not resent her. I loved her more than I can put into words. But she was a toxic partner, and we could not be just friends anymore. Several years went by, and I never fully gave up on the idea that maybe we could be friends again. There was so much in my life I wanted to show her, but I did not have a way to contact her. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a number I did not recognize. I ignored it and went back to sleep. Another call, then another. I ignored them all, half asleep. The next morning I called back and there was no answer. I looked up the number and it was a hospital room. Weird. 2 days later, an old friend on Facebook messaged to tell me Maggie had killed herself. I was devastated. I went to her father's house to give him my condolences and he handed me a letter from her. She said she always loved me, was sorry for hurting me, and felt a great deal of self-loathing over it. It had been her calling me that night from her deathbed. All she wanted was to talk one last time and die knowing I did not hate her. She died the next morning. Calling me was probably the last thing she ever did, and I ignored it. Story 164. Extreme neglect and abuse during childhood are devastating. Anyone born should be cared for and loved unconditionally and have a healthy community surrounding and uplifting them. I wish I could take away everyone's pain. The world would be cured. Story 165. I had a bad stomach bug that aggravated my obsessive-compulsive disorder and caused awful intrusive thoughts. Story 166. These are all devastating and personal, truly horrific. I am a man and have torn a groin muscle on several occasions. Once a bike tire got caught in a train track and I kept going while it was stuck. Another time I was doing Kegel exercises at the gym. I experienced immediate cold sweats, intense shooting pain and limped for about 30 minutes, followed by days of altered gait and discomfort when sitting. No fun. Story 167. If I had an enemy, I would let them go through everything I went through. Story 168. Losing the person I cared for most to addiction was devastating. I was with the woman I thought I would marry for 7 years. She was smart and talented, my safe place, and the person who understood me like no one else. But she moved back home and fell in with the wrong crowd. They influenced her to start using hard drugs, and she fell into addiction and began a relationship with someone else, leaving me. The last I heard, she had gotten clean, and I am so happy for her. I hope she rediscovers the wonderful person she was. Still, there is a giant hole in my heart that nothing else has filled. Story 169. The person I had loved and trusted most cheated on me with someone they had known for a week. Story 170. Divorce. All the Ryan Gosling literally me memes hit harder when you have actually been held and loved, when someone looked at you goofily only for it to be gone. It has been nearly 4 years and I am still single. This sucks, homie. Story 171. I had migraines from meningitis. Any light or sound felt like scraping glass along the sides of my brain. I spent 11 days in a pitch-black, completely quiet room, drifting in and out of sleep. I could not tell the difference between dreams and memories. I did not feel like myself afterward. I do not recommend it. Story 172. I have panic disorder. I was so afraid of eating that I nearly starved myself to death on 2 separate occasions in my life. Story 173. Childhood abuse in any form seriously harms a person. Story 174. Police held a man on the asphalt in Phoenix on a 115 degrees Fahrenheit summer day, and he said he would not wish that on anyone. Not safe for work. Images of third-degree burns. Story 175. Child abuse creates scars in the mind that cannot be undone. Story 176. Losing your father and best friend at the same time, without realizing they were the same person. Story 177. I lost 2 parents before the age of 25. One when I was 7 and the other when I was 24. Story 178. Breast cancer diagnosed in April. Hospice care for my mother in November of the same year. Story 179. I actually hate my worst enemy. There is nothing bad I would not wish on them. Story 180. You guys think highly of your worst enemies. One comment said, a toothache. Really? That's the least I would wish on my worst enemy. Story 181. Hydrocele. 6 weeks of unbearable pain not relieved by narcotics while the doctors kept performing scans. In the end it burst on its own. They could have saved me 6 weeks of pain by intervening. They would not admit the mistake because I had been referred by a prominent local attorney and because I am known for standing up to people. What they did not realize was that I had no intent to sue until I learned they could have prevented all that pain and the lost work time. Their insurance company settled quickly. Story 182. Living with a controlling, narcissistic partner diminishes any self-esteem you have. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.